All right, good evening. Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me? All right. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. What's that? All right, everybody. Hey, appreciate you guys. I love you guys. I appreciate you very much. I'm actually here representing the Rosenmeier board tonight, though, however, not your sheriff, although this is right up my alley, of course, right? So we want to welcome you tonight. We thank you. We appreciate you guys coming out to listen to these our fine presenters today. I think you'll be very interested in what they have to say. When they get done with their presentation, I'm going to go around with the mic, and I am going to let you ask them the questions. Initially, I was going to have you guys fill out cards and then submit them to me, and then I would read them. But they have assured me that you guys are not intimidating and that they couldn't answer any questions that you guys might throw. So with that, I'm going to let our professor from the CLC introduce everybody. So Steve, if you want to make your way up wherever you're at. And yes, thank Professor Steve Wenzel. You got it, I got it. I don't know, I can't. I'll let you know if I can hear you.
Do I use the microphone?
Yes.
Is it okay? Can you hear me? No, that'll. Hold on here. It'll be turned off in a second. I'm sorry about that. I want to thank Eric Klang, our Crow Wing County Sheriff, for the.
Yeah, 1 second, Steve. Oh, there's Steve. Yeah, can you guys turn it up back there in our sound booth?
Can you hear me now? Okay. I want to thank Eric Klang, our Crow Wing County Sheriff, for his kind introduction tonight and for being the moderator for this forum. I also want to recognize two people that are here tonight in the audience. In the audience is Sally Inney, former longtime president of Central Lakes College and the founder of the Rosenmeier Center in 1988. And also the president of Central Lakes College, Hera Charlier, is here, and we thank President Charlier for her always strong support for the Rosenmeier Center. Let's give Hera, President Charlier, a big hand. Stand. Okay. I want to welcome all of you here tonight to this important forum on crime and public safety, which, as we all know, the safety and the protecting of our citizens is the most important responsibility of our government, and at all levels, local, state, and federal governments. Gordon Rosenmeier would have been most proud to have a forum in his name relating to public safety, to achieve a state free from violent crime and state agencies free of corruption and the theft of now over $2 billion from Minnesota's current state government, the largest scandal of any state in the nation, and that's in last week's Wall Street Journal. I want our audience to know that Gordon Rosenmeier of Little Falls, who I see some Little Falls people here tonight, know that he represented Crow Wing and Morrison counties for 30 years in the Minnesota State Senate from 1940 to 1970. He is regarded by both historians and political scientists as the single most powerful, influential, and most respected legislator in all of Minnesota history. It is a fact that no bill or law could pass the Minnesota legislature without Gordon's approval. Our first speaker tonight is going to be Liz Collins, a Minnesota native raised in Worthington, Minnesota, and a multi-Emmy award-winning investigative reporter and news anchor for WCCO television, including the night news and the weekend news. Since she is the producer of The Fall of Minneapolis and Minnesota versus We the People documentary films, and author of the book They're Lying, the Media, the Left, and the Death of George Floyd. Her work has prompted important state laws Yet perhaps most of all, Liz has been giving a voice to the truth and helping others tell their stories for more than 20 years. Following Liz as speaker will be Bob Kroll. Officer Kroll is a highly decorated retired police lieutenant. He spent 32 years in the Minneapolis Police Department serving assignments on patrol, investigation, the SWAT team, and the union board. He also was the president of the Minneapolis Police Federation, which is the union of the Minneapolis Police Department. He has also served 21 years of service to his country in the United States Army Reserve as a military police officer. And our third speaker and final speaker is Bloomington Police Chief Booker T. Hodges. Police Chief Hodges has worked as a narcotics detective, SWAT operator, acting chief deputy, and now chief of police for the city of Bloomington, Minnesota. Prior to joining the Bloomington Police Department in April of 2022, he served as Assistant Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. He has also served with both the Ramsey and the Dakota County's Sheriff's Office. He truly brings a wealth of information and experience to the field of law enforcement. Chief Hodges earned a doctorate degree in public administration, I believe, from Hamline University. He serves as an adjunct professor at Northwestern University in St. Paul and has previously served as a national official in the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So now let's welcome our first speaker, Liz Collins. Thank you very much, yes.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you so much for having me here tonight. Great to see so many familiar faces. Steve did say that the kids in his class get extra credit for being here, so I see some young faces. That's a great teacher right there. Let's give him a round of applause. That's right. But this, I know, is an ongoing tradition. It's wonderful to be a part of it and to be asked to be here. I'd also like to recognize, if we can, to start this evening, if there are any members of law enforcement here, if you could stand. Also, any retired law enforcement, perhaps veterans or military members. I'd like to really recognize our community heroes to start these things off. It's really the reason that I do what I do, to try to set the record straight about everything you guys do. So let's give them a round of applause. God bless you guys. It seems that we're in very good hands here tonight by the looks of that showing. I'm going to start this evening by talking a little bit about my backstory, kind of how I got here and the state of public safety in Minnesota. I'm going to be honest that I wish I had better news to bring you all this evening. But I think that the only way this is going to get better is if we continue to tell the truth and speak out. And that's really why I left where I worked for 15 years. I've been in the media now for about 25 years. I know it's hard to believe since I look so young. I'm younger than Bob, if anybody's wondering. But I actually started at WCCO back in 2008. It was the station that I grew up watching. I dreamed of eventually working there and landed, what I considered the dream job back then. Funny story, I started a newspaper when I was 10 years old in Worthington called Neighborhood News. I was a very creative writer even back then to come up with such a name. But there was a guy that interviewed me back on WCCO radio when I was 10 years old about this newspaper because it was kind of taking off and getting media attention. And that guy was Don Shelby. He asked me what I wanted to do when I got older, and I told him that I wanted his job. And so it was about 14 years after that very conversation that I anchored my first newscast alongside Don, and from there I really kind of lived the dream, but was really bothered kind of what the media was turning into in my last few years. Not so much what we were telling the public, but what we were not. And on a personal and professional level, I've never seen it kind of implode the way it did back on May 25th, 2020. And the lies that were peddled in the wake of the George Floyd incident, we're all still paying the price to this day, especially in Minnesota, for those lies. I went ahead and finished my contract at WCCO, and as my little bit of therapy, I was kind of journaling a lot at the time and keeping notes and tracking this story. I was not allowed to report on it. Obviously, at WCCO, being Bob was serving as the Federation president, and I understood that, but I was so bothered by having information that I was passing along, and it seemed nobody even actually cared about the truth and to put out, you know, the other part of this story that we were just not hearing on the nightly news. So that was the point of putting out this book. I could not find a publisher at the time for the book. Nobody would touch this thing, of course. So I went ahead and uploaded it to Amazon. You can do that nowadays, thankfully. It still, to this day, now more than 3 years later, is the top-selling George Floyd book on Amazon, which also means that people do care about the truth. And I've been reminded about that every single day since really taking that leap of faith and trading in that dream job and just kind of charting my own course, because I think that if we're not going to speak the truth about what has happened in the past, there's really no way that we're going to be able to go ahead and move on and go from there. But I have copies of the book, I should say, tonight. If anybody hasn't read, they're lying. The Media, the Left, and the Death of George Floyd. I'll also be honest that I put this book out before the elections the last time around in Minnesota. There's quite a bit about our governor, Tim Walz, in this book, about our Attorney General, Keith Ellison, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. I mean, you name the cast of characters, but really what I consider the perfect people in the perfect positions for this to play out, not only in Minneapolis, but something that's spread all across the globe. Nobody listened to me. What was in my book? Everybody's reelected, right? But I've gone on to just continue to try to tell the truth in what we're doing over at Alpha News. And so the book then led to the fall of Minneapolis. If I can ask, by a show of hands, how many people have seen the documentary? Oh my goodness, thank you. That's amazing, thank you. Thank you. We did the documentary about a year after the book, put it out around Thanksgiving with the goal to ruin as many Thanksgivings as possible. We were successful from what we've heard from many families. But we really wanted to talk to the people that we never heard from and sort of also question, you know, if this is what we really want our justice system to look like. Are we fine with mob rule? You know, deciding court cases. And we've been tried to stay on top of this story ever since. I will say it was just 9 days after the release of the fall of Minneapolis that Derek Chauvin was stabbed 22 times in prison. There's a lot of questions about how and why that took place. And the person that did this, John Turskak, has yet to actually face trial for attempting to kill Derek Chauvin. And we continue to talk quite a bit about Derek's case over at Alpha News. But this documentary has now been seen, from what we can track, between YouTube, Rumble, all of the platforms where we released the documentary, at least 13 million times it's been viewed, which is amazing. We thought if we can get 1 million views on this thing, you know, it's great to spread the truth, but it's been seen all over the world, and I can't even tell you how many emails I've received or just messages that people said they had no idea the depths of all of this before, and this has really opened their eyes, and many people admitted to voting differently this last time around because they were able to see the documentary. But again, another reminder to just continue to be speaking the truth. So I jump over to the world of nonprofit news after working for corporate media for CBS News at WCCO for 14 years. And I went to Alpha News. There was 1.5 employees back then at Alpha News when I joined them. And we continue to try to tell the stories that our mainstream, our corporate media in town do not focus on. And sadly, many of these stories do relate to crime. In Minneapolis, there have been 3 homicides in the last 4 days. Not a headline that you'll likely see other corporate media report on, including on Thursday morning. Perhaps you guys heard the news of a man who saw someone rifling through his car in Minneapolis outside his workplace just after 7 in the morning. He went out to confront him and was shot in the stomach and killed, a man in his 40s at his workplace. We had this horrible shooting that happened in Dinkytown over Halloween, and from what it sounds like at this point, it was a U of M student caught in the crossfire. He was one of those injured, but there was a young man killed as well. And then we just reported today about someone else, juvenile, that was killed last night, and another juvenile arrested. Crime is not down in Minneapolis. I'll just be honest about that. You've had record crime ever since 2020. And again, we have a partnership also with Crime Watch Minneapolis. Great place to go for crime news in Minneapolis, all of those untold stories on X. That's where a lot of this information is posted. But also now what you've created is this situation where Minneapolis, I'm sure it will shock you, they are struggling to hire police officers. Wonder why that would be, perhaps, right? But you had a department that was nearly 900 strong at the beginning of May of 2020. Bob will probably speak to this a little bit, but there were conversations to get 1,200, 1,400 cops that the city needed even back then. From what we've been told, and we continue to track, I think it's about 300 officers that are now left actually on the streets patrolling. The department will say 550, 600, but you have so many of these people that are kind of working these desk jobs, I guess now, if you will, but it's really the officers that are on the streets. You have constantly, we're getting people telling us they're calling 911, no one answers. I know there'll be some stories tonight from these guys as well. Really heartbreaking to see what has happened to really a once great city and really a great police department. But the power of the narrative can be a powerful thing. So we have this, who are they getting to be police officers? There was some recent information that came my way about 40 recruits that were hired on at Minneapolis. I think it's 27 of them remain now. Each week, a couple more drop off. This guy has had a rough history. So this is now this crisis we've created. Who's really out there doing this job? And I think that these will be, more stories that will continue, sadly, in Minneapolis. And, I wanted to speak a little bit about, we obviously have this public safety crisis in Minneapolis, but it's also coming at a time when so much is coming to light about another layer of fraud. I think you could also point to what has happened in Minneapolis as a bit of a fraud as well. Many of these organizations have cropped up basically saying that they are law enforcement members now, right? And they're getting millions of dollars from the city budget and not doing that proactive policing. These people are not, trained, and we've seen where some of those groups have been called into question, rightfully so. We have a fraud page, though, over at Alpha News. So you just go to alphanews.org, click on fraud, right at the top of the page, and Steve's right. We had more than $2 billion so far has been tracked just in the last few years from some of these reimbursement programs in Minnesota. And we've heard the acting U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson talk about this at press conferences in great detail about how he believes, from what he's looked at, that this is really just the tip of the iceberg. They've, at this point, charged a couple hundred people related to this fraud. I think it's 75, 76 alone related to feeding our future. But you can hear very candidly how they can't arrest their way out of this problem. There is now this culture in place in Minnesota, sadly. And unless we get new leadership, I'm going to be honest, it's not going to get better. I know Walz has come out, right, and said that he's now hired an auditing firm. So you guys, there's nothing to worry about. It's really incredible that he hasn't done anything in the years prior, but now that here we are a year out from election time, and he seems to really care about fraud. But I encourage you to look at that page, because there's so many stories that you will see that I bet you probably weren't even completely aware. And I'll say, even now at Alpha News, we've gone to address after address after address just from tips that we receive at Alpha News in the Metro. And you have signs on the door, you have couches set up inside when you're looking through the windows. and these people are getting millions of dollars in state funding, and nobody is inside the business. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories we've done at this point that's exactly what has happened. In fact, I was just at one of these autism centers last week, maybe 2 weeks ago at this point, and people are now taking this into their own hands. They're putting up surveillance videos themselves, turning over their videos to the state, saying, "Will somebody do something? We're seeing this play out." And I went there, and everything is just kind of this fake setup. And this business alone received $2 million of our tax dollars last year. And again, it's just one example of a much bigger picture. So here's just a glimpse of. We really believe at Alpha News to put out stories, reporting that gets results, and we do see it. Of course, we're the right-wing crazy, news. That's how we're, that's what the Star Tribune calls us, which is really a badge of honor considering they're lunatics. Sorry, I was supposed to dial it back here tonight, but. You have many stories that you just will not simply see in the Star Tribune or on the nightly news. And this is a story that was generated this summer. We got a tip about this man, Wilson Tindy, being paid $145,000 by a state agency to work at the Minnesota Department of Education. He came from another agency actually before all of this, and this tipster said, he's got a kind of a sketchy criminal record. I'm really surprised that he can be working at the state agency. Well, it turns out he was in the U.S. illegally, and he sexually assaulted a woman in the metro, broke into her home, sexually assaulted her, and then was hired by 2 different state agencies. And this was a story that then was picked up by others, and I did a ride-along with ICE back in September, and just so happened that they went and picked up Wilson Tindy on that ride-along. But I'll say that to this day, and this was September 8th, you can see the story, but not one single media outlet has covered this part of the story, that Wilson Tindy is now facing deportation, and that our tax dollars went to pay this guy for years. And it seemed, but now you guys should be, it's fine. The state agencies have now implemented some criminal background checks, which I was shocked there wasn't any before, but they did come out and say that they were going to go ahead and tighten their standards. But I think after the fall of Minneapolis came out, I just, over at Alpha News, we've now grown to 5 people. So we're, which is actually pretty amazing, because we have the most website traffic than any other news agency in Minnesota. We're kind of like this little powerhouse, but again, kind of keeps pushing us forward because people do care about the truth. And what happened in the wake of putting out the fall of Minneapolis, you really saw it. It was very quick, and I'm sure Chief Hodges can speak to this as well. Just this lack of respect for law enforcement. Unbelievable that things that were happening and still do to this day, for what it is these men and women do each day. So that led to our second documentary called Minnesota versus We the People. I guess it's the play button I have to push, I'm sorry. There we go.
Smile.
So I just pulled him in the back room where Dad's office was, and he said, "I'm sorry, but Dad's gone."
Chacha, are the victims of
seen probably the worst moment in my life, seeing an officer down in the middle of the street.
You worry about your officers?
All the time. I worry about my cops all the time.
This case has changed.
It has. It has.
Their agenda is not ours. They have a different agenda.
It's bullshit. It's absolute 100% pure unadulterated bullshit.
The more divided we are as a state, they're better off. And I'm simply not going to be quiet when I see that.
So this is a documentary obviously we never wanted to do, but it kind of became the tragic sequel to the fall of Minneapolis, and I think a lot of lessons can be learned. But we lost, in a matter of 13 months, Pope County Deputy Josh Owen, Burnsville police officers Paul Elmstrad, Matthew Ruge, and firefighter paramedic Adam Finseth, all young men with their whole lives ahead, and then obviously the tragic murder last year that happened in the middle of the street, in the middle of the day in Minneapolis, with Minneapolis police officer Jamal Mitchell as he was rushing to help a man who ended up killing him. But truly tragic, and I encourage people, if you have yet to see it, and again, share it as well, because these men, you don't see their names at Target Field. We don't have days or proclamations for them, and we very well should in this state, because sadly, many of them have died for politics, and it's pretty sad. So Minnesota versus We the People, you can find it on the fall of Minneapolis. So all of this time, and also included in this documentary, is the story of Minnesota State Trooper Ryan Londrigan. He was the 6th officer in a matter of just a few years to be charged in Minnesota with murder. And finally, that went away. But we documented that case quite a bit in Minnesota versus We the People. But again, you have the same narrative from the media, as you can see with this headline. This is how they go ahead and twist the audience up. And I will say, working at WCCO, this was part of the mandate. This is how you were taught that you had to go ahead and portray news stories. Yes, it was something we had to do to control the language and push it on the public. And during this time, we are trying to push out the truth over at Alpha News about this case. And there is this attorney by the name of Chris Maddle in Minneapolis that takes Ryan's case, a longtime defense attorney and prominent attorney in Minneapolis. And he was meeting with me, kind of thanking me for trying to get the truth out about Ryan's case. The charges are dropped, thankfully, and Ryan's back out on the streets working to keep us safe in Minnesota, on the roads again, thankfully. But it was after this meeting I had with Chris, he mentions that if, over at Alpha News, if we ever need any legal help, he'd be happy to help. Just really appreciated us really sticking to the facts of the story. And would you know that 2 days after that conversation with Chris Maddle, I was served with my very first lawsuit. So again, been a reporter for quite a while, never been sued before. I usually leave that up to my husband. But we have Assistant Police Chief Katie Blackwell, who sued myself and Alpha News for defamation for her public testimony in Derek Chauvin's trial that I wrote about and also reported on in the fall of Minneapolis. And would you happen to know that the law firm that represented Katie Blackwell, they are good friends of Keith Ellison and Ilhan Omar, who are not big fans of what we report over at Alpha News. But we went ahead and just an amazing job that these attorneys do over at Maddle, PA, but they gathered 50 declarations to introduce to the court. 34 of those declarations came from Minneapolis police officers, current and retired. and they all signed declarations to say that they were trained in the maximal restraint technique, a technique that Katie Blackwell said she did not recognize on the stand under oath. 14 of those officers said that Katie Blackwell committed perjury in Derek Chauvin's trial. So this was all introduced in court, and we had to go to court to argue our motion to dismiss. I say it was the first time and hopefully the last time. I will be the subject of a sketch artist, although my hair has never looked better. I mean, it's really great. But also, we found in the MPD yearbook, you see that down in the corner there, that is in fact Katie Blackwell doing an awful familiar maneuver here. And we went ahead and introduced that in our case as well. So it was 60 days after we went to court, all 60 days we waited, and thankfully the truth prevailed and our case was dismissed. Not only that, but the judge said that everything in the book and the documentary was substantially true. Katie Blackwell herself had to sign a declaration to basically say that she agreed with the judge's ruling, and she had to pay our attorney's fees. So, it was so that hopefully is behind us. And also, what's interesting is this will also play a role in Derek Chauvin's case, which we'll be hearing about later on soon. And all of these are introduced in court. And I will say that this judge also was a Governor Dayton appointee, a Democrat, this judge. And you know, I think a lot is made about politics, but when you really do stick to the facts, you can open some eyes. So I just also wanted to mention this is actually in the news today, as a matter of fact. So Tu Tao was released from prison today. He's been held in a federal facility in Kentucky, and he's coming home. But we have Alex King, Thomas Lane, now Tu Tao, but they will all be lifelong felons for what took place on May 25th, 2020. You had Thomas Lane, Alex King. They were off FTO for just a few days when this incident happened. Now forced to kind of start their lives all over again. Alex King in a federal facility surrounded by sex offenders for 3 years. I'm not sure how we decide that this is, you know, what the justice system should look like. But I encourage you also on YouTube. We have a 5 years later sort of series there. Is this really justice after George Floyd? And we speak to these officers, their families, and also some other Minneapolis police officers as well. So if you haven't seen that, you'll find that on Alpha News MN on our YouTube channel. But every day we're releasing new content on Alpha News on our YouTube channel. We have more views than the local news. So just so you know, we love when people share our content. You guys may lose friends, but you're going to be sticking to the facts. And again, I think that this is the only way that we change things is if we do speak out and keep on talking. It comes at a cost. I'm not going to lie. I've had a few protests at home. I've been canceled, demoted, all of that. I've been sued. I can add that now to the list. Bob's signs are always much better than mine, sadly. But we can't use this as an excuse to stay quiet. It is really all part of the playbook. And if you don't feel safe, and if you're not safe in your community, then you are not free. That is why this is so important to push back on a lot of this. I mean, a lot of us will just say, okay, we're not going to go to Minneapolis anymore. But this really is a problem for all of us in this state. And the solutions are there. We just need the right people in the right places, and so that's what we have to work to do. You know, we have a little work to do. We have a year to try to figure this out. We have tomorrow. We're going to see how that goes in Minneapolis. We'll get results from that election for mayor in a few days. But well, actually, this is a perfect way to introduce my husband when we have these pictures up. I would say my better half, but I am actually the better half. So let's go ahead and introduce Bob Kroll. He's going to come up now and speak. And the better half get it?
Yeah, that's good. First thing, guys, I'm going to put my stopwatch on because Liz, I was at a panel with her in D.C. and they had a clock down there, which was nice where people could watch because the professor did a great job lining us up, and it was very regimented. You know, we're going to dinner at this time. We're at 7 o'clock sharp. We're starting. I'm going to introduce. You've each got 15 minutes, and then you can chat together for a few minutes, 2 to 3, and then we're going to take questions for 45 minutes. And you may not know this, but my wife and I are polar opposites, okay? In high school, she had keys to the school. She was the head of students against destructive decisions. I was the guy that had the keg parties in the woods. But she's on me all for the last several days. Do you have your presentation ready? I think you should go over it with me. And I'm like, I'm a cop. My wife has never met a microphone she didn't like. As you may have noticed, she went about a half hour. I said, I'm not going to prepare anything, so you don't get a PowerPoint presentation out of me. You don't get video clips. First of all, I don't know how to do it. Second, it would get screwed up. So I'm going to wing it, and I'm going to adjust my time accordingly. I'm going to give Chief Hodges his whole 15 minutes. So I have 2. So bear with me. I am setting a timer. I'm going to kind of stay on track, but I just wing it. That's what I do best. And I always say I'd rather leave more time for your questions rather than sit and listen to me talk, because I'm just the opposite of my wife. That said, so last thing, she says, well, what are you doing? Yesterday I'm having a few beers watching the football game. She goes, do you have your stuff done? I want you to really go over this. I said, well, I'm going to start like this, because I've heard her presentation a few times since the book came out 3 years ago now. I grew up in the east side of St. Paul, and one of my favorite things to do was watch Adam 12, and I lived next door to a St. Paul police officer and down the street from another St. Paul police officer, and one day I shoveled snow for both of them, and I told them I wanted their job one day, and I came damn close. I ended up in Minneapolis, but that's my background story. Liz always does that, but no. My whole life I wanted to be a cop. I got hired at 23 years old with Minneapolis PD, the first place that took me on, and I always wanted to be in a big city. It was kind of that or St. Paul, having grown up there, and got my dream job. Prior to that, I went in the Army Military Police Reserves, and I retired out, stayed there, and ended up being an MP instructor concurrently with my PD job. But I started there at my 18th birthday on the reserves, stayed for 21, started when I was 23 on the PD, and I stayed for 32. But that was my only city I worked for. Didn't know anybody there starting out virtually, and it was my dream job. I took a $8,000 pay cut to go from the Postal Service to the police department, and it was truly a ringside seat to the greatest show on earth. Had a lot of fun. Worked all of our precincts, patrol. The camaraderie there was unbelievable. Contrary to what they'll tell you now, the citizens, the businesses, they loved the cops in Minneapolis. We had a great time on duty and off duty in that city. I had, like I said, all precincts. I worked undercover on the Vice Squad for over a year. Got promoted to sergeant. I worked in investigations, specialty units, patrol supervisor. Got promoted to lieutenant, again, investigations, patrol. And concurrently, along those years, for 15 of them, I was on our SWAT team, which is an additional duty assignment. 4 years as an officer, 11 years as a sergeant, and 1 year as a lieutenant on the team. So at the end of it, I ended up half my career on SWAT. And additionally, another additional duty I had on there was I was elected to our Federation board every 2 years. There's 10 members of the board. The media would have you think it was just me, and I called all the shots all these years, and I fell out of the sky as union president. But no, I was on the board for 25 years. We have 5 directors. I started as a director for 9 to 10 years. Then I went to the vice president for 9 or 10 years. And my final 6 years in the job was the only time that I had one job, and that was the union president. I had no other assignments in patrol or investigations, and I was done with SWAT. So that was my only job. I finished my last 6, kind of a second career concurrently all that time. For 25 of my 32 years, I was on the union board. My last 6, I ended up the president. So that's my background. I'm already at 5 minutes, Liz. But beyond, so anyway, that's the history. And we had, through that whole time, about 900 officers, give or take, 900 complete for the department, all ranks. As a union, we represented everybody, so that was officer, sergeant, lieutenant, everyone except the top appointees, in 10 to 20 people, depending on how much they expanded and contracted the administration. And I maintained that position through the ranks. I was elected, even though, you get down, in Minneapolis, there's about 40 lieutenants, and you're fairly high up, but I was still elected by the membership of officers to represent them. And the big job of the union is, like any other union, you negotiate your contracts, your wages, your benefits, your time off, your working conditions. That's all it was. And then a big part of that was you represented officers when they're involved in critical incidents. So an officer involved shooting, you go out to that. On those things, all you really do is introduce them to their attorney, and because we don't have attorney-client privilege, it's a union rep. But officers involved in a critical incident, they get involved in a shooting or something like that, you marry them up with their attorney, you tell them the process, and you don't need to get into the specifics because you can get called into court on what you know. So when the Chauvin-Floyd thing went down, everybody would think that, everybody in media that doesn't know any better, or in the public mob would tell you that I orchestrated all of this, and I had really nothing to do with it, other than tell the involved officers what the process was going to be, introduce them to their attorney, and leave the room, and that was the end of it. We as union belong to a collective larger agency called the MPPOA, the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, and that we pay into a fund which pays for the attorneys to represent officers in those incidents. One other big role of the union too is you represent officers in internal affairs and civilian review or Office of Police Conduct review investigations. Believe it or not, people do make false complaints against the police. We guide them through that process. You're there as, in that setting, somewhat their attorney. You file grievances when discipline's unjust or an investigation was not completed. Maybe do a counter investigation to find out the truth. And many times, most of the times, the officers are cleared in these cases. Sometimes, rare occasions, they'll go to an arbitrator and they're cleared after that. That was kind of the union role. So that's kind of what I did in different levels, or in different groups. SWAT, back in the day that I was on SWAT, it was, as an officer on SWAT, we were doing all the drug raids when the crack wave hit and things like that. It was not unusual to do anywhere from 30 to 70 high-risk search warrants a month on the team. That's all you did. Barricaded suspects, call-outs, things like that. But at the end of it, I've done in the neighborhood of 1,500 high-risk entries over my 15-year span on SWAT, and that is your old school drug raids. Now those are some of the contrasts on where we've gone now. I've had departments around, the department has always been around 900 people. The largest I remember it being was 940. The smallest was 760 in my time there. Now they're struggling to get above 600. They've had mass exodus, people have left. And the sad part about this is there's no standards anymore for getting on. When I tested to get on Minneapolis, St. Paul, other agencies, there were literally nearly 1,000 people for 35 spots in a St. Paul or a Minneapolis Police Academy. Now you've got 300 vacancies and you have 80 people show up for them. So you look at the standards. In my opinion, if you're trying out for a police job, you should be in the best physical condition of your life. They're showing up that couldn't pass the bare minimum standards of what we had, let alone SWAT standards. They're looking the other way on backgrounds. If you might have saw the news the other day, there was an officer from Minneapolis that had been arrested for DWI. He had 2 priors in his history. I knew people that were fired in the academy for getting a DWI, period, gone. That's how things have changed. They're looking the other way on backgrounds. The sad part about that is you're going to get bad people going into it. When you don't have the cream of the crop to choose from and you can't weed them out psychologically, criminal background-wise, physical fitness-wise, mental fitness-wise, we're headed down the wrong path, and that's where they're going right now in Minneapolis. I know the chief's going to speak after me, and credit to him and his agency, but they're one of the very few agencies in the state of Minnesota that are overstaffed. They're full, and that says something about his leadership. It's the problem Minneapolis is having is spread throughout. St. Paul's suffering from the same thing, not nearly to the same scale, but they're still down 50 to 100 cops of what they should be. Agencies like Golden Valley are down to less, they're like 30% of what they should be. People have left. The wrong people are moving up into leadership positions, deterring others from going to agencies like that. Think what else? When I came on and when I worked those years, you cared about the job and you trained others in to do that, to do the job. The good police work is done from proactive police work, meaning you're out there looking for something. Anybody can go get dispatched to a 911 call, go there and take a report. But what stops the violent crimes, the gun violence, the other things from happening is proactive policing. What I mean by that is you're out on patrol and you're aggressively looking for things that are wrong. When you've got county attorneys like Mary Moriarty saying, we're not going to prosecute anything if it results from a traffic stop. That means you could stop a vehicle for completely legitimate, no taillights, you name it, you stop them and you recover. The back seat is full of firearms, all unregistered with no serial numbers. She will not charge. That's what they're doing. That's why elections have consequences. So the result of that, when it comes to the police level, the cops are saying, the hell with it. Why would I do this anymore? If I get a complaint, I'm going to be in trouble. I could lose my job. Worse yet, the person resists arrest or something and I hurt them or kill them, I'm going to prison. If I do the good police work, make the good arrest, it's going to get thrown out anyway. So that's what's going on in the city. It comes down to elections. Not only are they running about 600 cops now when it should be at 9, they don't have time to do any of that, and they don't have the will to do it because the support isn't there, and they're afraid of either losing their job or going to prison. And Chauvin and the 3 others are living proof of that. So put things in number perspective. When Mayor Fry first ran, he met privately with our Federation board. I was the president, and he said, listen, if you endorse me, I will give you 100 more cops. And we were running low. We considered 900 low in that time. And we said, sure, we endorsed him. He didn't want any public thing, but he wanted our supporters and our money to pack money to him and stuff to get elected. He got elected. And guess what? It's going to shock you, but Jacob Fry didn't hold his part of the bargain up. We got 14 new officers instead of 100. But then the best part, he appointed Chief Arredondo as chief of police. He, after being there for a few months, in the honeymoon phase of having the new chief, raised in Minneapolis, born and raised in Minneapolis, Chief Arredondo asked Fry, he said, to put us where we need to be comparatively on a nationwide scale, to have me do the things I need to do to run a police department effectively, I want 400 more officers over a 5-year period. So by my math, and granted it's St. Paul Public Schools, but 400 plus 900 would be 1,300. They're at 600 right now. So that's what you're looking at. That's where what the situation is in Minneapolis. And most importantly, you have officers that don't have the will to work hard, and sadly are not even getting trained in to work hard, because now you've got training officers that are saying, don't stop that car. There's too many calls pending. We got to go to it. Don't stop that car. I got a year to go. You're not going to get me in trouble. I want to retire. Don't stop. Don't get out and check out that guy. None of that is going on. Where before, we used to have statistics when we were on patrol on who had the most felony arrests every month, who had the most misdemeanor arrests. And if you were at the bottom of those stats, you were shamed. It's completely the opposite now. So it's a sad, sad situation. And I'm down to 14 minutes and 45 seconds, Liz. So that's what lack of preparation does. And I'm going to leave you with this. So she worries about what I'm going to post on social media. She worries about what I'm going to say in public settings. And yes, I've been sued a few times, 14 to be exact. But she worries about these things, but when she gets in a pissing match with like a Jason DeRusha or a Tom Hauser on Twitter, she's like, what should I say? And I'll say it, and she's like, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. I fight all of her social, so if you follow her on Twitter or Facebook, the good stuff is really coming from me, you guys. With that, I'm happy to introduce a beloved chief in the state of Minnesota, and I mean that sincerely, Chief Booker Hodges from Bloomington PD.
You know, when I agreed to speak here, I should have told him, you know, I don't like speaking behind podiums because I think it makes you feel like you're a lecturer or something. But before I get started, how many people are students in here? All right. So I want you guys, I'm going to say something to you all. Yeah, give them a round of applause. So every time I go speak, I make sure I talk to the young folks. One thing I want you to know is don't ever let nobody tell you how to think, right? Don't let nobody tell you how to think. But you don't get to tell nobody else how to think either, right? So right now, for you all, you got these phones and all this social media stuff, and everything is set up to try to tell you how to think. And if you don't pay attention, other people are going to tell you how to think. How many of you students have heard of some concept called trickle-down economics? A little bit trickle-down economics, trickle-down economic theory. I want you to get out your phone and Google trickle-down economics theory, and I want you to figure out who ever authored trickle-down economics. Where is the theory behind trickle-down economics? It doesn't exist. It's one of these things in America, you know, some people call it Reaganomics, right? It's one of these things in the American lexicon that we've developed that is not real, right? So there are many things like that that people are going to try to tell you out here that are not real, right? So for me, especially for you young folks, you really need to pay attention. Because right now, in terms of public safety, we need you all to pay attention. Because you're the future, right? Gen Z, which is the generation now, this young adults and teenagers, only 40% of this generation agrees that the United States of America is a good country. As adults, we failed this generation, right? These devices have continued to make our society less safe because they have dehumanized us as people, right? So if you're not a human, I can go into a school and shoot up 20 people and not care, right? If you're not a human, I can get on this phone or internet and call you whatever I need to call you, right? So the greatest threat to me to our public safety is this. And in my position as chief, I can tell you this and these social media platforms are our greatest threat in public safety. So you see a lot of these statistics up here, especially in our cities. These kids are starting this stuff on these phones, and they're not reporting it to the police, right? So when we go there after someone's killed someone or after someone's hurt someone, all we gotta do is pull the phones. And it's all on there for us to see. And for you older folks, I'm gonna lecture you a little bit, then I'm gonna get into my speech. The United States of America, and I say United States more than I say America, is the greatest country that's ever existed on the face of the earth. There is no other country that has tried to do what we've done here in the United States of America. Are we perfect? No. But no other country on the face of the earth has ever tried to do what we've tried to do. But as older folks, what have we taught our kids about this country? What are we teaching our grandkids about this country? They simply don't know about this country. So just to give you an example, the older folks, I think they call it the silent generation, right? 90% of that generation agreed that the United States of America was a great country. So from the silent generation, that's just the generation that's fought World War II, to now, we're at 40%. 40%. And what do you think, how do you think that plays out, right? where now you have generations that think it's okay for political violence, right? Where if I don't like you, I can go get a deer rifle and go up to the top of a stand and shoot you, right? What do you think happened to Mr. Kirk, right? A guy that was going around campuses having debates, actually talking to people about issues and talking to people who might not agree with him, and you're gonna go get a deer rifle and shoot him just because you don't like him and he's not a human, right? We really have to start teaching our kids how great this country is, because they just don't know, right? And if you get on this phone and these social media platforms, it's gonna teach you a vision of this country that I don't believe is true, right? I mean, this country I still believe is the greatest country on the face of the earth. Anything you want in America, you can accomplish. I mean, I'm living proof of that. I grew up in North Minneapolis. My family hated the police, right? I mean, they just did, right? It was what it was, right? But for me, I don't know like how I ever got into law enforcement. I think it was a calling. But I spend every single day making sure that our cops go out here and are able to do their job. I'll take the hits. You can go out here and do your job. And that's why in the city of Bloomington, like they said, we are overstaffed and our crime is at levels since the 1970s. And there's a reason for that. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just fortunate enough to where I've worked with the greatest human beings, I believe, in our state. But the topic today, when you start talking about public safety in Minnesota and really where we're at, I think it depends on where you're at, right? We need Minneapolis to be successful because if they're not, it affects the rest of us, right? Because if they're not successful, your taxes, my taxes are going to continue to go up. If they're not successful, less people are going to want to be in this police profession. And the reason why I don't think they're successful, and I grew up in Minneapolis. I spent my whole life in Minneapolis. My family has lived in Minneapolis since 1949. So we're like old school Minnesota folks. I've lived in this state my entire life. But what I've slowly watched take place in the city of Minneapolis, and I get in trouble for saying this, but they can prove me wrong, is there's a marriage to dysfunction. If what you're doing is not working, stop doing it, right? And if you can agree, like from growing up there my entire life, I got family there, no one feels safe, and the stuff that's tolerated in the community would not be tolerated anywhere else. Now, we can go out here and bash these people for that, or we can come with a message like I do, is saying, you don't have to live like this, right? If you call the cops, someone should come. You shouldn't have to tolerate people going outside and hitting you upside the head, because the ultimate definition of public safety, in my view, is being able to walk outside and not be afraid that someone's going to hit you upside the head and take your stuff. I'm pretty sure there's a more academic version of it, but that's my, my version for what it means to be safe. But our state, in terms of public safety, being down police officers, we're on borrowed time for that. And I just want to look everybody in the face and tell you, we're on borrowed time for that, right? And we need to start coming up with what we think a definition of public safety is, because there's multiple different definitions of public safety, right? And law enforcement plays a vital role in public safety. I'll say as cops, we don't prevent crime, we deter it. So during COVID, the increase in crime, I believe, there was a lack of deterrence on the fact of police officers. People just felt like cops weren't going to do their job, nothing was going to happen to them, so why not go out here and commit crimes? Now, we've started to come back a little bit in some areas, but in areas where you don't have that fear of deterrence, you still see high crime rates. And people shouldn't have to live like that. You should be able to go to the park. You should be able to go outside in your porch without somebody coming up and asking you money, or you're worried about getting shot at. You should be able to drive around the block and realize you've left your door open and being like, okay, I can go to the store real quick and come back, versus, oh, I got to turn around and go lock this door because I know if I'm gone for 30 seconds, someone's been watching my house and they're going to walk in my door. You shouldn't have to live like that. And I think, the more and more we can get that message to people, I think the better and better they can be.
Because ultimately, public safety, yes, we do have a role in that, right? But I tell the citizens in Bloomington all the time, I'm glad the vast majority of y'all decide to follow the law. Because if you didn't, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it, a little bit, right? But it's like, how do people want to live in the quality of life? And we all want to be safe, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Safety comes first. Because if you don't feel safe, you're not going to sleep, you're not going to eat, right? And that's one of the things that we want to do as a society and law enforcement is make sure that we're getting out there and hopefully making people feel as safe as possible. So with that, like I said, I like to listen to questions as opposed to you guys hearing us babble on for a little bit. And I just want to thank everybody for having us here today. I'm pretty sure you had something else to do. I don't know who's playing Monday Night Football, but I know it's not the Vikings, so, or I wouldn't be here.
Students are going home, write their papers. Studious bunch.
Eric, I think I can start off with this first one you gave us.
All right, go ahead and read it.
So, someone had asked, I think it says, private actions to minimize gun deaths in Minnesota. So, let's talk about gun deaths and homicide. What I firmly believe we can do. First, we have to enforce the gun laws we have on the books, right? And we're at Hennepin County, one of the laws that doesn't get enforced a lot is felon in possession. It is cut and dry. If you are a convicted felon and you get caught with a gun, it's illegal to do that. We don't prosecute those folks for that. I also believe that, the law that negligent storage of firearms, right? I've been in plenty of houses with $10,000 safes left wide open, and they're calling us and complaining that someone stole all their guns, right? If you are a gun owner like I am, be responsible and lock your guns. And then lastly, I think that if you cannot allow people to continue to commit acts of violence and get out of jail. Like this country, I think the first time you do it, if that's your first offense, we're going to do everything we can to wrap around you and give you the help you need. But the second time, you're going to prison. And we're going to try and get you to programs. Why do I say that? People talk about racial disparities and all that, but there's a racial disparity in the graveyard. Because if I allow you to get out from committing a crime of violence, and you commit another crime of violence and I allow you to get out, how many more victims are we going to have? A lot. And if we could do that, I think we would drastically cut down on a lot of our gun violence. But quite frankly, a lot of our detection tools now are behind the 8 ball. Our Supreme Court ruled that you can have ghost guns in Minnesota. Most people don't know that. Right? So what's a ghost gun? A ghost gun is a firearm without a serial number. You can print that on a 3D printer. Right? And another thing I like to educate people on who are not gun people, the only part that's considered so if you got a pistol, right, just a regular semi-automatic, the only part of that that's considered the gun is the part with the trigger. The bottom part with the trigger. That's considered the gun. So like a rifle, everybody sees them call them military-style rifles, M4. The only part that's considered the gun is the handle and the trigger. So if I print that, I can go online and buy gun parts, and I don't need a permit to buy gun parts. Most people don't know that, right? So they can print guns now, and it's legal in Minnesota. Thanks to that Minnesota Supreme Court.
I was the one who asked that question.
Hang on one second. Let's use the mic.
So I was the one who asked the question, but a bigger question than that. Thanks, I agree with all that. We should be doing that everywhere. Is a moral one. Is it not coming through?
Yeah, we got you.
Just a little closer. Thank you very much. So Sandy Hook was, what, a decade plus ago? Uvalde's a handful of years ago, and the Annunciation shootings are just recent. Have any of the congregations been willing to give up their guns? Have any, as press, you're a member of the press, have you asked them if they've asked their congregations to give up their guns? Do they love their guns more than they love their children? I think the answer is apparent. They love their guns more than they love their children. Why don't you ask them that question, for heaven's sake?
Okay, we got a lot of questions coming here, so I need you guys to.
I can answer just from a media standpoint. We've done many stories on. I think even the Annunciation shooting, pretty interesting how this pivoted right away to a gun issue, and the fact of the matter is there was a shooter, a trans shooter that has been an issue that has been hidden from the public. Who executed these children and injured 3 others. And we, over at Alpha News, decided to dig deeper into that situation, what's happened in Minnesota. We have some laws that have been passed by our governor. Trans refuge state, meaning children are allowed to come here and change their sex without parental permission under government laws. So I think that actually, I think it's pretty abhorrent how these children have been used by politicians to turn this into gun issues, from my personal opinion. Well, I'm saying I'm going to sort of report this is something that's been recently in the news.
Let's make it a moral issue, because morals underline and support the laws that do or should exist or shouldn't exist.
It's a moral issue that
listen, let me finish, lady. Let me finish. It should be a moral issue. And every congregation ought to be exposed to the question of, is it moral to possess those weapons? You can argue none of them pulled the trigger, but why not ask the congregations? Don't make excuses for them.
I also think there's red flag laws that exist in Minnesota, and this person should have not have been able to buy guns. Clearly his family and friends failed him. No.
Okay.
Do you think people that don't have morals are going to surrender their guns then? The only person that's going to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
All right. You guys need to ask questions. We don't need to hear commentary. Just please ask the question. Here we go. Back here in the back.
So the question I have is, as a Christian man, since 2020, we've seen an erosion of things that you can say and can't say as far as free speech, where your different agencies, government agencies or whatever, or even in public, they try to limit what you can say. And it's not just the ivermectin thing that happened in 2020, 21, 22. The freedom of speech, do you see the erosion slowing down, or do you see it staying the same?
I'll just say from my personal opinion, what I've witnessed over at Alpha News, I mean, we would do stories about the vaccine, about some horrendous injuries that have happened to Minnesotans, that we were getting tips at WCO that we could not report on these stories. That was a mandate also. But we saw it at Alpha, we would get blocked, and strikes given to us on YouTube when we put stories out there. We are in a completely different world now. Where people are able to see our content. We've grown from, I think, 20,000 followers on X to like 100,000 now, and that was thanks to Elon Musk, who bought X and all the things that he uncovered that was being blocked from the public. But that is happening in corporate America. That is happening with the news. They tell you what to say. They have mandates that are in place, and I talk a lot about that in the public. It's exactly what the chief is saying. He's telling you how to think. That is happening. But I really think under President Trump and his policies, a lot of this has been changing for the better because we're able to access more information. That's good for all of us.
And I want to say one thing about like free speech here too, and like what you said, people clap, this is the United States of America, right? We do get to have free speech, right? And the good part about it is, if you don't like what someone says, you don't have to listen to them. And that's what I keep reminding people, even like my kids, like, you don't like what it says, turn it off. There's other stuff, right? I mean, and that's what we have to do. And I'm just gonna my utopic view of the world. Every last one of these shares, every single thing here is developed materials on Earth. As human beings, we've been given a lot in this country, in this world. Let's enjoy it. Let's try to be happy, right? Let's not just be mad all the time, right? God didn't put us here to be mad. Be happy. I'm sorry.
All right, back here.
Yeah, I have a comment. So you don't need a gun to kill people. Aren't we about the only country on planet Earth we can own guns? The rest of the world, they get very creative when they want to take someone out. So you don't need a gun. And so we like our guns in the United States. So I just want to make that comment. But so my real question that I wanted to comment about was Derek Chauvin and his men. And I just wonder why they were ever put in prison and what happened to them. And so if that happens to them, other police officers would be afraid to arrest someone, and that's what's going on. But just why, man, if that was my son, I don't know. I just think it's really sad that he's still sitting there and the rest of them. So I just wonder what can be done and why it wasn't done sooner.
So he has his last chance at an appeal is coming up. The U.S. Supreme Court decided not to hear his case. They ruled on that. But he's now appealing on ineffective counsel, essentially, is kind of the last shot. So there'll be some things coming out in the next couple weeks. Part of our case will be used in that as well. It's really an uphill climb. People have said, okay, well, President Trump can pardon him. Well, then he comes back to Minnesota. He's in state prison. And Keith Ellison and Tim Walz have talked greatly about how they're going to make him serve every single hour in a state prison in Minnesota. It's very unsafe for him. He'd rather be at a federal facility where he's allowed to go outside and work every day. So it's a little complex and a little complicated because they charge them with state charges and federal charges. The other officers pled guilty to the federal charges after seeing what happened in your case. We're never going to get a trial and take this case. But I encourage you to see the Fall Minneapolis if you haven't seen it, and go to fallminneapolis.com and click on the news section there on the website. There's updates on every case and all the different developments in it.
I don't think people really understand what it's like being a police officer psychologically, mentally, physical strain. All of this stuff affects you every day of your life. You have things happening to you that people in here would never experience. Back in the day when I was 17 years old, my first sergeant gave me a brand new M14 in the box. He also gave me a service number, 1984101. That's the Orwellian number. So I'm stuck with that. The federal government gave me the Orwellian Marine, and I give testimony to that. It was a gift. So what I'm saying is, I just got out of jail at 4 o'clock. It's good news because I go there every Monday to teach a drawing class. I like doing it. I like going to jail, okay? That's okay. It's okay. But being a police officer is difficult work. You get picked up for DWI, who are you going to blame? Police officer? You're dealing drugs? Who are you going to blame? Over the 15 years that I've been doing this stuff at the Corona County Jail, I've had neighbor kids who've become police officers. I see them in the jail. So, as a society, we have to understand that every job is difficult, the strain, and you bring that home with you and doing that. I've been teaching for almost 50 years, PA to university level. When I go to jail on Monday, I'm dealing with individuals, students of mine, who have killed other students of mine. Students of mine who have killed other people. And as a society, we have to get a hold of it and work together and get this stuff solved out. Talking about guns, when you buy a Ruger with a long barrel and put a bump stock on it and put a 60-round magazine on it, and you're 14 years old and you go driving down the street in North Minneapolis and you're really upset and you open up on somebody, police officers have to deal with that mayhem. And it's difficult for you to do that. And I appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
I grew up in Minneapolis, and I lived in a very liberal part of the city, Prospect Park. And I learned when I ran for legislature that the trouble is the people in this room, I think, are mostly conservative. Mostly. But I can tell you the big difference between the two parties. The liberals are all trying to change something. They're unhappy people. They're trying to change and set up laws and run against the current. And conservatives, those of us, most of us in this room, are content. We've worked hard for what we've got, and we're content with what we have. And so we're lousy politicians. We conservatives should be out knocking on doors. You should be. I'm glad you're here hearing this, but I can tell you, I grew up in the southeast Prospect Park area where all the liberals look down their nose at us conservatives, and we should be out knocking on doors.
All right, now remember, I got to remind you guys, we got to ask. These are questions. We can't do comments. I got to get this guy here.
Sheriff makes
So questions only, please.
What is the starting pay for a police officer?
When I started in 1989, I can tell you it was $19,000 a year.
And what is it now?
Now it's more like $90,000 a year.
I know they passed it. They did pass an increase in Minneapolis.
That varies by agencies.
Okay.
So I know that officers are, I think they're not starting in the 80s in Minneapolis, but they get to 90 very quick. They had a good union rep all those years.
Okay, so one other thing. You have not talked about mental illness and crime at all, and that's a big problem.
You bet.
Big problem, and no one, you're not addressing it, so.
So,
I only had 15 minutes, my wife took 30. That was my next thing I was going to say.
So let's, and I can address that just real briefly. In Bloomington, we're the only police department that has, we got in-home therapists. We provide in-home therapy to people who suffer from addiction, or, we have to go to their house and have families that use. So we have to stop going back over people's houses and provide that to people for free. Because what we found is if we can get them immediate therapy in crisis, we're not going to have to keep going back out to their houses, and they're not going to keep committing crimes. Now, there's a certain segment of the population that we deal with that therapy is not going to work for. And we have not figured that out yet because there is no appropriate place to place these people, because we have group homes that are in the communities, but when person X goes out naked and my kid's going to the bus stop, then the people in the neighborhood don't want the group home in there no more, right? So I don't, when we figure that out, and I'll just say this real quick because most people don't realize this, state hospitals, we don't have those no more. Hospitals can only have 15 beds because that's all Medicaid are paid for. So that's why we don't have a big place anywhere to put people for, because Medicaid won't pay for it.
And juvenile facilities, I think, have been cut in half in the last few years.
Yep. Well, and that's why for us, that's why we got our in-home therapists that we've invested in.
All right.
Hi. You guys gave a talk on political violence in Minnesota without mentioning Vance Bolter, who recently killed Melissa Hortman, her husband, and her dog. Is it, I guess my question is, how do you reconcile coming on stage with Bob Kroll, who isn't allowed to be a cop anymore because of the racist violence that he committed?
Let's actually talk about
and how do you, and what is the point of coming and talking about political violence without even mentioning Vance Bolter? And
let's back and let's take them in piecemeal here. What racial violence are you referring to regarding me?
You were sued for $700,000 by the ACLU for unconstitutional brutality during the George Floyd protest, and you had to pay.
Okay, and my wife can tell you where I was during the George Floyd protest. I never left the city of Hugo. How does that?
You had a whole
and they got zero out of that lawsuit. Zero.
The reason Bob took the settlement is the goal of the lawsuit was to drain the bank account of the Minneapolis Police Federation. He had retired, and that he was the only person that was sued. He was sued 4 times for the riots. The riots that he never even participated in.
I was not in the city. I had no command and control of anything. I wasn't in the city, but I will tell you that I was in the city during 3 different riots, and I actually was the supervisor in charge. And they were done in hours because nobody interfered with my leadership, and we crushed them and stopped. There were no injuries, there were no lawsuits, there was no riots after the riots, but they were quelled within hours under my leadership on the ground.
I will say that
during
the
those
story
riots.
about the settlement is really more about lawfare in Minnesota that has been alive and well these last few years. You continue to watch the mainstream media and believe the things that are peddled. We believe in back law and order. I'll also say on the Vance Belter situation, no media has done more reporting on that situation than us at Alpha News. It is absolutely horrific what took place that night. Who was on the top of the story from the very beginning reporting the truth? Alpha News.
This wasn't your first instance or complaint either about racist violence. You have a history. This wasn't the first time.
I couldn't hear anything.
This wasn't the first complaint about racist violence that you committed in your time.
Okay, you're saying a blanket term, racist violence.
Yes,
I have been sued 14 times. Never once did they get any money. Never once. It takes nothing to file a lawsuit against an officer in Minneapolis. But if you repeatedly sue them, a lot of things will happen. Are you going to allow me to answer your question, or do you want to keep talking over me? If you, what is the question? I can hear you just fine. She talked.
You just asked a question, and this was a public safety. I guess I didn't know it was political violence. I'll come back and go ahead and bring that up.
And I'd like to just correct the record too. You're coming up with this rhetoric about me. I have been investigated numerous times and cleared in the end every single time. And officers here will tell you that cops that don't get complaints, you should be concerned with, because they're probably not doing their job. They're not stopping that car at 4 a.m. and dealing with bad people doing bad things. But your aggressive cops are, and they're not deterred by frivolous complaints.
Thanks, Bob. I've got a constructive question. Chief Hodges.
Oh, thank God.
Thank you, and bless you that you're fully staffed. What do you see as the outlook? Most of the people in here, this is a big deal, but you're probably not aware of how big it is. Law enforcement in Minnesota, on the decline numbers-wise, how can we recruit more officers? What do you see as the answer for this decline? Minneapolis PD doesn't affect just them. It's outstate, Crow Wing County. we need officers. We have more people retiring, gray hairs up here in the suit coat, than we have people in this school that want to get into law enforcement. How do we change that? I honestly think it's going to get worse before it does get better, but I do believe the pendulum can swing. So, Chief Hodges, what do you think?
So for me, and I'll say this, the problem with police organizations has never been the cops. It's always been the leadership in police organizations, right? And as a chief, I can say that. So for us, I tell people when you come work for Bloomington, you get to be who you are, right? And that to me, you know, I don't want like a carbon copy police officer. Like for us as a profession, we've spent years hiring people who are good at 5% of the job, which is shooting, arresting, and chasing down bad people, right? And not 95%, which is going out here dealing with the community, writing reports. We hire people who are good at 95% of the job, but if you can't do 5%, you can't. We're not going to keep you, right? Because you still have to be able to do that 5% of the job. But for me, it's about getting out here and telling the truth about what the profession is, right? I mean, law enforcement, have we always done things right? No, we haven't, right? But our role is we're the backstop, right, in society, right? And in law enforcement, we're in the middle, right? And that's, you know, from a spiritual standpoint, if I wasn't in this uniform, I'd have another comment, but we're in the middle, right? That's where we're supposed to be. And people need to understand that, you know, we're not left, we're not right, we're in the middle, because our job is to protect all Americans, and really getting out here and telling people how great this job is. And I see my kids, I'm a police officer who doesn't mind if my kids want to do this job, right? Because I'm not going to tell my kids not to do this job, because if I'm going to tell them not to do this job, I might as well just turn my stuff in today, right? It's a great job. Are we perfect? No. Right, but it takes a certain type of person that wants to do this job, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it for anybody in this room. This job is a very stressful job, and anybody that wants to sign up to do this job needs to be commended. I mean, I can tell you right now, dude, like I personally, like my body, my mind, everything in me has changed since I've been a police officer, and it's a toll, but it's not a hostage situation either. Right? I mean, I can quit anytime I want, right? But it's one of those things where it's a tough job, and we need people to do this job, and I think it's incumbent upon us and leadership to go out here and tell people how great of a profession it is.
Thanks for coming tonight. Since the Supreme Court decision, how many ghost guns have killed people in Minnesota?
I don't have the numbers.
Are there numbers?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could get them.
Because I haven't heard any numbers of a ghost gun killing somebody since then. So I'm just curious.
Yeah. I don't know.
One more question. Derek Chauvin was federally, you already mentioned this, federally and charged by the state. Why is, and maybe they are, and maybe you don't know, why is the federal government not going after Blackwell for perjury?
I don't think it's within the federal government's
It was
authority to do
it was a
it.
state trial, so it would basically have to be Mary Moriarty who would charge
Well,
her.
right, but he wasn't federally charged?
Her testimony changed during the federal trial.
Oh, it's okay.
Her testimony was, and no one in the state is going to prosecute her.
It would be up to Mary Moriarty in the state to charge her. Yeah.
Thank you guys for being here. You're all courageous and still fighting the battle. Thank you for sticking it out in Minnesota.
Thank you.
Question, Liz. At what point is our media going to be required, like the olden days, to speak truth?
Oh, there was some stuff happening in the old days too. I actually think we live in a great time that independent media is actually taking over kind of the corporate media. Isn't it nice to actually hear conversations with people? It's not edited down. You know, when I was a reporter at CCO, I had a minute 10 to tell a story. That was 1 minute and 10 seconds was the
you saw how that goes through up here.
Yeah, you can imagine. But it's really difficult in those moments to really portray. You know, everybody says stories have two sides. Well, sometimes there's 3 or 4 or 5 sides. So it's nicer to kind of have platforms now where we can hear conversations. People can speak for themselves. You can tell, I think, a lot about people you're interviewing just by having conversations with people. So I think there'll always be the nightly news is already really changing. You see there's not two anchors in a lot of places anymore. They're streaming, everybody's going to streaming. People just don't watch in the numbers they once did, but again, I think it's better for all of us to have access to as much information as possible before we make decisions. Not just, basically the news has turned into, it's the same story, told the same way, in the same order. Here's weather and sports, have a great night. There's just more to it than that.
So I've got a question about the comment where social media disconnects us in almost an inhuman type of reaction. So we walk through the world seeing people and we just don't resonate. So if you were talking to a group like this, so we talk about deterrence, so we got to have a stop sign, and that hurts, puts people away, puts them in jail. I'm okay with that. How can you at the same time then teach us, how to connect with each other? I've never had a tough time, being able to do that, and I usually let people do that with me. But I don't see that happening. So what would you say from your viewpoint, news media, or in the corporate of the police world, unions, or as a chief? What's a good message to send, to us? Here's how to connect with people, and also how to hold your distance at the same time.
So for me, connection is, it's dealing with, again, like if I wore this uniform, it'd be a different version of this. But for me, I go and deal with people who I might not necessarily agree with on issues. I don't put myself in a bubble with people who just agree with me on everything, because that's not the way the world should work. And every time I get with a bunch of young people, I try to tell them that too. Because if you look at the research that's out there about this younger generation, if you don't agree with someone, people are agreeing that it is okay to do violence against them, right? And I mean, for us, for all of us in here, talk to your kids, talk to your grandkids, right? Even if you don't agree with them, right? I talk to, because I teach at a college, right? And so I don't agree with grandpa, so I'm not talking to grandpa. Well, okay, right? But when grandpa dies, you're gonna be pulling out the Kleenex and crying and wishing grandpa was here, right? So let's get out and let's have these conversations with each other outside of these phones. Because right now, can you tell me one single argument, one, that was ever won on social media?
I'm sure what I'm going to say is going to apply probably to all three of you guys. Now, everyone here says that they support law enforcement and all that fun stuff. But sometimes I question that. In fact, I question a lot of things with Team Red, Team Blue, and this and that. But not too long ago, our own House representative decided to voter intimidate a police chief named Mike Davis. And following that, it went in front of an administrative law judge for the voter intimidation. Alpha News didn't cover it, even though I let them know about it. And what was really odd is that was the first time I've ever seen a public official actually stand up to a politician, like ever. The guy did the right thing, stepped up, exercised his First Amendment right, voting rights and everything, and said, look, this guy was voter intimidating. He was actually trying to get this police chief fired because he didn't like the way that this guy was going to vote. Now, Bob, you're part of the MPPOA. Brian Peters, in some respects, with regard to the...
Bob has been retired for 5 years, but I love that you're still being blamed for everything. That means you still got it.
And Bob, you weren't involved in this, hopefully. But however, Brian Peters, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Now, Mr. Heinzman threatened the police chief to call the MPPOA in his quest to get him fired. His own brother's right here, too, so I'm sure he knows all about it.
I think we should probably just move to the next question. I don't know what the question is.
So why did Alpha News not cover it?
I have no idea what you're talking about, sir. Do you know that we probably receive 50 to 70 tips a day? So I apologize if it's not a story that we covered, but...
When was this? Yeah. I retired in January of 2021.
All right, listen, I'm going to take one more question. These guys are going to stay around to answer any questions that you have that you can go up and ask them as well. But we want to be respectful of people's time that are, so they're not leaving. Okay, so hang on one second.
Hi, thank you for being here, first of all. I would like to hear...
Thank you, are you nice? Great.
I don't have a scary question, I promise. I have something that hopefully will maybe give hope to people. So I'm under 40, I'm in that younger generation. There's quite a few other younger people here. I'd like to hear from each of your unique perspectives how us young people can contribute to positively impacting like our public safety and making our state a better place.
Great question. I'm inspired, and honestly so inspired by the next generation in this state specifically. I'll just say that the very first people to ever even post anything that we were doing with the book or the documentary was a Turning Point chapter at White Bear Lake. This was years ago. The Republicans thought I was completely nuts at that point. Obviously, the other side of the aisle wasn't having me either. But it was Turning Point kids that said, hey, we'll host a book event for you. People are interested in this. And so these were high school kids that took on security concerns and all kinds of things. And just even the Turning Point stories that we've kind of been trying to tell over at Alpha News, there were 6 high school chapters in Minnesota. Before Charlie Kirk's assassination, and I think 7 at the college level. Now at colleges across the state, there are more than 30 the last time that I spoke with the director, and I think at high schools they're up like 24 or 25 in Minnesota. People are speaking out now, standing up for freedom, and that's really been inspiring. But the biggest piece of advice I would say is to get involved, have conversations, talk to your classmates, at the younger levels, but also even, you're talking about your age, get involved with your local, whether it be political group or church group. We do have to talk to each other, and even just back to that other question, it's so important, I think, to listen to people. That is also important as well. It's not just sort of like my way or the highway. That's why I like the podcast forums. You can learn so much from other people if you just listen.
Regarding law enforcement, a lot of agencies offer citizens academies you can go through, and you learn a lot about what happens within law enforcement, and might change your mind even if you're predisposed to have a dislike or distrustful law enforcement. Take advantage of the Citizens Academy program. They vary in length. They're a night a week for X amount of weeks. Do ride-alongs on agencies that offer them too, and it might give you better insight and maybe in some cases change your mind.
And for me, I think it's just be happy. These social media platforms. I mean, right now I can tell you the thing that scares me the most. And I'm not going to get into what we as a department are doing, is political violence. Because the acceptability of that now is more because it's me versus you on these platforms, and I say all this stuff, and if I don't like you, or I don't like this, I go on this platform and I believe all this stuff about you, and then I can go on this other one and believe all this stuff about you, and then eventually, now I'm mad enough to where I'm going to go out and do something to you. Get off the platforms, get out here, and actually talk to people. And you might find out some of that stuff on there ain't the truth about people. So.
Hey, we want to thank everyone for coming tonight. We appreciate your time. It's about 1:45, and if you want to come down and ask any questions, please feel free to do that. One more round of applause for our guests. Thank you very much.
There's the books if you want them.
Yeah, we'll do.
You guys are fantastic. My pleasure.